Telescopes have opened our eyes to the universe. The telescopes commissioned in and around the world are providing evidence of billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars like our Sun, and space phenomena that tell us about our evolution. India is also leaving no stone unturned to identify transient or variable objects in the overhead sky. For this, a first-of-its-kind liquid mirror telescope has been commissioned at Devasthal at an altitude of 2,450 meters in the Himalayas. Established at the Devasthal Observatory campus of Aryabhatta Research Institute of Observational Sciences, ARIES, the telescope is built by astronomers from India, Belgium and Canada. The novel instrument employs a 4-meter diameter rotating mirror made up of a thin film of liquid mercury to collect and focus light. To know more about India's first and Asia's largest telescope, the PBNS team reached out to the director of ARIES, Professor Dipankar Banerjee, who is a physical metallurgist and materials engineer and a former chief controller of R&D at the Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO.
Let me first of all thank you again for this opportunity to express this new telescope which is under commissioning phase in Devasthal. So Devasthal is our second observing site at the Himalayas in Mukteshwar. So ARIES is currently proud to host two major observational facilities, particularly from optical. So namely, this is the 3.6 meter Devasthal optical telescope at the same site at Mukteshwar. We also have a smaller telescope, 1.3 meter DFM telescope, which has been operational for more than a decade now. And now, very recently, we got the first slide from this, international liquid mirror telescope of 4-meter diameter. So let me first tell you that the conventional telescopes are normally built by reflectors in the form of either a mirror or a lens. So bigger the telescope, it is more difficult to use the lenses. So most of the modern telescopes are built from mirrors. And these are glass mirrors with different coatings and so on. The advantage of these conventional telescopes also is that, you need to, point out your telescope to any part of the sky. And that also allows you to track any object which of your interest as it moves from one part of the sky to the other part of the sky. Whereas in this liquid mirror telescope, instead of glass mirror, the idea is that mercury, which is a very good, liquid and very good reflector, it can be taken any shape when you deform it. So what we do is we pour this huge amount of mercury, about 50 kgs, in a bowl. And then if you start rotating this bowl with a certain angular velocity, then the liquid will spread over. And the shape of the bowl, which is normally a paraboloid, because these kind of telescopes, the primary mirror, the reflecting surface, takes a shape of a parabola. And when the light from a distant object falls on this mirror, it gets reflected into a focal point. And in this liquid mirror telescope, the disadvantage is that we cannot rotate it or we cannot turn it, so to say, a different part of the sky because of this rotation speed which has to be maintained. And there is also a question of gravity, so balancing of this gravity and the rotation, what you import in this bowl gives you the shape of a mirror, and it always looks at the zenith. So you have a sort of half a degree field in the zenith, and any object, when it is crossing this field of view, are captured by this telescope. So the advantage is that it is a pretty big, mirror of 4-meter class at a much reduced cost as compared to a conventional, glass mirror telescope. Almost it's 1/10 of the cost of a, conventional telescope to this liquid mirror telescope. So that's the sort of, a quick comparison between a conventional glass telescope as compared to the liquid mirror telescope. Now, your second question is how relevant is this and how important it can be for research in the field of astronomy from India. I already mentioned that this is a pretty large size telescope of 4 meter, conventional telescope, the largest so far from India was 3.6 meter, which is also situated in Devasthal. The other telescopes in India is mostly in the 2 meter class in other parts of the Himalayas, or even a new telescope is coming by Physical Research Laboratory, near Ahmedabad, which is also a 2.5 meter telescope. So you can imagine a 4 meter telescope means, it can look at the more distant object. So our quest for, fainter and more distant stars and galaxies are always there. So very weak sources you can capture with this 5 meter telescope. So it will have an element of, discovering new objects, which is there from our part of the, globe, in this, half a degree, within this half a degree field of view. So it can detect any moving object for that matter. So it can be a galaxy, it can be a star, it can be an asteroid, it can be a space debris, or even a satellite. So we are observing all the time when this will be fully operational. And within this field of view, any object comes, we need to identify those objects. Now, the other big advantage of having these two big telescopes at the Devasthal site is, suppose you detect an object in the sky with this liquid mirror telescope, which has only capabilities of imaging. That means it can only image. It cannot do further analysis in terms of, when we look at astronomical objects, we try to characterize its properties. What is its temperature? What is the kind of velocity with which it is moving? Whether it has atmosphere around it. So for that, what you need is, we need more instruments with spectroscopic capabilities and so on. So the idea is now that you detect some object which is so-called new, which you have not known earlier, and immediately you point out your 3.6 meter telescope to that object with much more sophisticated back-end instruments, and then you will be able to characterize the properties of this object.
That apart from the conventional, is there the time and operational feasibility that liquid mirror gives? It's just a layman person asking, as if we can simply break it down, because when a telescope is placed, it is placed and pointed towards one direction. But with liquid mirror telescope, will it be able to cover a wider diaspora and wider range of universe, we can say? And is that a bigger advantage?
It's a very good question. So as I pointed out, that we are not able to maneuver the telescope to wherever we like. We are always looking at the zenith. So the point, it is looking at the open sky with a half a degree field of view. But your point is nice, that within that large field of view, we have a possibility of, detecting more number of objects, because it has a larger field, larger, areas which it will cover. So these telescopes are also often called as a survey mode telescope, that we are surveying the part of the sky. And what also happens is, we can continuously look at subsequent days. So the same object may come back, again and again to the same part of the sky at similar time. So that allows us to, add on all these images, following that images for a number of days, and get a better data about those objects. So this is somewhat related to what you mentioned, that these kind of telescopes are very good for survey, that, you're surveying a part of the sky and trying to detect new objects. Suppose, there is a gamma ray burst. These are, stages of a stellar evolution where, the stars can explode, or even sometimes, it's a galaxy itself will have certain morphological changes and so on at the center of the galaxy. And then you want to detect that particular timing. Possibilities are better from this liquid mirror telescope.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for in, because when we talk about the space phenomena, the universe, it's so huge. It's just not about searching for the planets, the galaxies, black holes, and space debris, supernovas. There are like so many phenomena right now happening simultaneously in our universe while we are sitting here talking to each other. How does it is just a curiosity question, that how does scientists decide what to choose, what to survey, and how this sifting process actually takes place? It's really phenomenal thing to just think even.
Yeah, that's also very, very interesting and right question. So normally a scientist tries to focus on certain objects for his or her own research. Also, the PhD students will have a defined problem to look at during his or her, again, PhD tenure. So you're absolutely right that someone is working on, say, stellar evolutions and these supernovas, and when the supernova will explode. And if the supernova explodes, then prior to the explosion or after the explosion, what are the characteristic properties of these objects are. So depending on the scientific interest of individuals, they will use that part of the data. So this is also very interesting from a liquid mirror telescope, that that particular image is going to have a number of things, as you pointed out. So all these images will be distributed to a number of scientists. And depending on my interest, I will look at that particular object. In fact, since you asked this question, in fact, so many different objects, when you look at it as a single image, the movement of all these objects are different. And they're at different distances. So we are going to apply a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning, techniques in the data pipeline to first characterize or identify these objects. And once those objects are flagged, then this data will be distributed. We will make this data available to the scientific community at large. And depending on individual's interest, he or she can use the data for that particular subject where our interests lie. So it has a huge potential in terms of serving many different individuals who has different interests and subject areas.
Sir, as we have seen that liquid mirror is an international collaboration. This telescope is an international collaboration from Belgium to Poland to Uzbekistan to Canada. This has been whole setup and operationalized finally to go on to the operationalized stage. So can you enlighten us how such international collaborations in specifically science and astronomy would lead to furthering our strengthening our research in astronomy?
This is a very, very important point. In general, science is becoming global. We cannot do science being in isolation now. In earlier days, people used to work in their own, small little office and used to do calculations and then they publish and all that. But particularly in the field of observational astronomy, it is very important that we have a wide variety of interactions within the country and beyond. So the international collaboration is so much important these days, because these objects, there are two elements actually. One is that you need to study in the multi-wavelength. Multi-wavelength means, only the optical light or the radio wavelengths we can detect from the ground. You need to go to higher up mountains to see a little bit of infrared. But if you want to see the emission when X-rays and ultraviolet and so on, then you need to go to the space platform. So combination of space programs and ground-based programs are important. And space programs globally, particularly NASA, ESA, and JAXA, the Japanese space agencies, have really evolved over the years. So we need to participate in those programs as well. In terms of the liquid mirror telescope, it's actually a very good example of a quality international collaboration. Professor Paul Hickson, he has been involved with this liquid mirror telescope with NASA very, very actively. There have been 6-meter telescope also. But as you also mentioned, those telescopes were not dedicated for astronomical purposes. So this is the first liquid mirror telescope which is dedicated for astronomical observation. So I was referring to Professor John Surdej from University of Liège in Belgium. He has been also instrumental in this particular project. In fact, a lot of things have been driven from Belgium, and the telescope, the hardcore part of it is designed and manufactured at AMOS in Liège. Again, it is a Belgian company who were responsible for the 3.6-meter Devasthal optical telescope also. So we have two telescopes at Devasthal, currently, which are the largest telescope in India, were built in Belgium. So this is again a very good example of international collaborations, how we can achieve these world-class facilities. Having said that, we are catching up with this technological advancement, because we still do not have such precision instrument building facility within the country, even within the industry. So that's why we are still dependent somewhat on the international scenario. But we hope, once we start using these facilities, we have to maintain it. That means a day-to-day, a lot of operations, a lot of upgradations are required to be done at our side, and we are actively participating in that. In that way, we are actually gaining much more knowledge about these sophisticated instruments. So hopefully, with this advanced knowledge, sometime in near future, we'll be able to build this with industry partnership as well. So this is something which we are also keeping aside as a part of the advantage or fruit to be taken out of international collaborations.
Since ancient times, India has been at the forefront of science and technology. With time, we are advancing towards achieving self-reliance goals in the scientific spirit. Hear what Professor Banerjee has to say on that.
It's a very good question and a very important one as well, that at the end of the day, if we want to sort of really migrate from a developing nation to a developed nation, we need to be self-reliant. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat step, which has been really highlighted by government now, we are all very supportive of that. But sometimes what happens, there is a transition period. There is a time required to catch up with the technology which is there in the Western world. Some of these sophisticated instruments, they have certain precision which they have achieved with with their technological advancements over several decades. And frankly, my opinion that we have to catch up with that, because in our industry still we are making a lot of productions, but in terms of precision instruments, which demands this international quality, observations and so on, we still haven't reached there. So I would say that it is good to have such collaboration, which allows us to participate and really appreciate what kind of precision which we need. So this is what I was trying to indicate, that now while using this and maintaining it and regularly even troubleshooting these instruments, we are getting into the hardcore of these instrument development. We are also collaborating with these people to troubleshoot. In fact, this last year and a half has been quite in a way a lot of new learning has come, because we have managed it. See, none of these people have visited last 2 years, but our telescopes are operational completely. Whenever there is some troubleshooting to be required, we call them, and then remotely we take a lot of their advices, but we execute it now. So through this process, we are learning how to get into that kind of precision instrumentation. But we need to work with our industry now and see how best we can involve them into this precision making instrumentation. So it is required, and we are in the first stage of that, I would say.
Sir, ARIES not only is responsible for giving us the best of telescopes of the country, but also is responsible for educating the youth, aspiring youth, by giving the programs, the training programs required. So how do you see the participation of youth right now in astronomy when it comes to the research sector of astronomy?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And actually, this should be our one of the major thrust, that how to generate the next generation. The HR exercise is, we are taking it very, very seriously now. We have a very active, PhD program. I mean, we are only 22 scientists here, but we have about 55 PhD students. And we also take a lot of intern students, project students. Right now, there are about 30 odd, project students from different parts of the India. They are visiting us. They stay here for over a month and do projects with our scientists and engineers as well. We've also initiated an MTech PhD program with the Calcutta University, where the engineering students can come into astronomy. What we now realize that amongst the youngsters, there are a lot of interest in astronomy. Actually, it fascinates people, and we have to find out ways to accommodate more students at different levels, starting from undergraduate to postgraduate to research level. And we are into that, but we have to enhance our infrastructural facilities. We are doing that. Government is quite supportive in this. We are building new hostels. We are building other centers where we are building science centers, training centers. So these are some of the elements which at ARIES I am taking it with the highest priority. And as you mentioned, after all, we are using taxpayers' money to do our research. So it's our obligation to the community at large, that how to motivate the youngsters particularly, and also the public. So we do have public viewing exercises. We have our smaller telescopes which are dedicated for public outreach activities. We conduct a lot of schools and workshops at ARIES to accommodate students from different colleges and universities. And apart from that, there are day visits possible from neighboring schools and colleges. And we conduct, short-term, training, sessions as well for them. So these are the elements which we are taking it quite seriously. And it's very, very important to take things forward.
Well, that's all for today's segment. Thank you for watching.